Good morning. Hello and welcome to the Faculty of Classics. My name is Edith Johnson and I'm the Outreach Officer for Classics at Oxford, dedicating my working hours to raising awareness of classics and encouraging folks to apply for our courses. We're delighted that you have joined us for this live stream Q&A focusing on classical archaeology and ancient history. Here to answer your questions, we've got this fantastic panel, and starting with Milena, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Edith. So my name is Milena Melfi. I'm a classical archaeologist. I teach classical archaeology, Greek and Roman, and I'm an archaeologist on the field. I do field work as much as research in the library, like many here at Oxford. At the same time, I'm also a museum curator of casts in the Ashmolean Museum, which is a resource that we all use here in Oxford. I think that's quite enough.
Thanks, it's great to have you with us. Next up, Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm just going into my second year of classical archaeology and ancient history.
Thanks, Emily. And Sav.
Hi, I'm Sav. Much like Emily, I am also going into my second year of classical archaeology and ancient history at Wadham.
Brilliant. So if you're watching this live and you've got the classics events, live events open day up, there's a little blue box and it's got the Q&A in it. If you want to type your questions in there, and then we'll see what we can do to answer them. So I will start off with, see if you've got something. The first question I've got that's come through is, what's the interview like for classical archaeology and ancient history? What sort of questions and topics did you get asked to discuss?
So I'm happy to start. I remember my interviews because I got really thrown when I saw a lot of my sources because of things I'd never even remotely seen or heard of or studied. I think that's quite a common experience for a lot of people. Like, it was quite niche topics, but it was really interesting to be sort of given a source, and then to in my interviews it was a structure of, I had pre-reading for about half an hour and then I had the interview, and it was really it was all sorts of topics. I remember I got given a topic about like grave inscriptions in Roman Gaul, which was something I had never heard of. I got given a law that was from sort of 600 BC, and I had, again, no clue. So it was really like getting new information and like assimilating that and like using things I did know, and also sort of common sense and sort of things like that to like get through the interview.
Yeah, I agree. I had a lot of things that I really didn't know. I think I had a wall painting from Pompeii. I think I had some grave inscriptions as well. And there was questions on my personal statement too. So on sort of some museums I'd visited and things like that. And then I had another one which was about, it was an extract from a play. And then also about, it was like a sanctuary and medicine sort of themed one as well, that was good.
Hang on, Milena. Could you just take yourself off mute?
Sorry, that had to happen. So that sounds all very familiar, but this is exactly what happens in interviews there, that candidates are asked random questions, relatively random, of course, but something that you're not supposed to know from your previous studies, and it's very rare that it's something to be expected. But that's simply because we are interested to know, to understand how you think about materials, about texts, and that's the main interest of the interview, trying and understand, trying and see how you would deal with an object or a site that you've never seen in your life, and how you deal with a text that you've never read before. And that gives us a lot of information about you, more than you can give us from something you've already read about, just giving us some information that has been processed through school, through books, and so on.
Perfect. So there's two questions that have come through that I think they sort of go hand in hand. So one is, what's the distribution between practical archaeology and more theory-based archaeology? In fact, go with that one first.
Shall I go for it?
Thank you. Yeah.
From a sort of syllabus, from a syllabus point of view, the practical part comes mostly from the fieldwork experience, which is basically the excavation that all the classical archaeology and ancient history students are supposed to do in pre-pandemic and non-pandemic situations at the end of the first year, and comes also from the Museum of Site report, which is a supervised piece of work on on materials or sites that are the students' choice, really. And for this is all very interesting, because in the fieldwork part sort of introduces the first year students to material culture and to building structures, objects through the excavation, while the museum report allows them to focus on the specifics of what they want to study. It's completely free. It's completely your choice, and it could be sort of focused on a site. It could be also abroad. The faculty has generous grants, and the colleges have generous grants for traveling abroad and to see things which are of interest, and or it could be on a museum object or a group of museum objects that can be done again either in the UK or abroad, and all of this is supervised. Of course, you get a supervisor, so you learn really how to be a researcher in a way in archaeology, because it's the first step towards sort of original research.
So somebody's wondering, like, before they've actually applied, before they get to Oxford, will I be at a disadvantage if I have not completed any dig work or had much of experience in archaeology before I started?
So I remember this was a question that I had, because I had no experience in archaeology. I hadn't really done classical languages either. I was sort of like coming into it with relatively little information comparatively. And I remember getting told at an event like this, don't worry about that at all. In fact, sometimes it's better to not go in with a lot of preconceptions about archaeology. It's all about like learning and interest, really. So you don't have to be on any digs. I know that I wasn't. I know that a lot of people on the course weren't. But if you're interested and you're willing to learn, I think you're going to be all right.
What do you think, Emily? Had you had much experience before you started?
I went on a dig for one day, but that's all the experience I had. So I didn't learn that much in one day, but it was a good experience and I enjoyed it. But yeah, like Sav says, I don't think it's too important.
No, it's absolutely not important. Also, we don't expect really at school age and so on to have had sort of first-hand experience of archaeology. I mean, it might help to see the interest. Of course, people who are interested in museums, in reading books about the ancient world and so on, which don't have to be academic books, but some basic interest is obvious. Otherwise, I would imagine you wouldn't choose this degree. But certainly not hands-on experience in archaeology. I wouldn't even recommend it, actually, because too young for that. I mean, if you want to have proper instruction about that, then come and see us.
Oh, well, that leads on really well to this question, actually. What extracurricular activities should I look at if I'm looking for a good preparation for this degree?
That's exactly, I can't think of anything more than really sort of follow your interest in the ancient world. So it could be, again, museum, archaeological sites, or even reading history texts, or it's entirely up to you. It's classical archaeology and ancient history, so I suppose it's anything about the ancient world, from TV programs to books and publication and anything. But that probably you have you can tell us more from your previous experience.
I mean, I remember, and I wrote about this in my personal statement a bit, but it wasn't like things I had learned about in school, so I did A-level classic, but I really enjoyed, like, I think things that were quite niche in the ancient world that I was really interested in. Like, I got super into reading about ancient magic because I found it really interesting. So I did like loads of reading on that, and because I was interested, and led me to all this other stuff. And I got really excited about Pompeian graffiti. So I did loads of reading on Pompeian graffiti, and these very like small and specific things that just really interested me meant that I did a lot of. You end up reading like a lot about a lot of subjects because everything's super interdisciplinary. But if you follow like what you're interested in, and kind of don't worry about like, oh, I don't know every detail about, you know, every war that happened, or I don't know every detail about every, you know, major event or things like that. Like, people have, you're going to have some gaps, and that's okay if you just like follow what you're interested in.
Exactly. Emily, what about you? What sort of things were you interested in whilst you were doing your A-levels or equivalent?
Yeah, so I read some of Herodotus, which I really loved. And then I also read a bit of a book about Pompeii, and then I tried to link things together. So then I went to a Pompeii exhibition at the Ashmolean in Oxford. So, and then I also, like I said, I did go on a dig for a day. And then there was also an event on near where I lived at one of the museums, which was like sort of like lots of lectures about archaeology. So I went to that as well. Just lots of different things to show how interested I was, because I was just loving all of it.
Brilliant. And you just said you went to the Ashmolean before you started, but we've had someone asking, will a student studying CAR have access to places such as the Ashmolean?
I think this was both. I remember this because Emily and I were in this tutorial together. But we did the Homeric Archaeology module, and which meant that, like, usually it's at the start of term, but it's coded at the end of term. We got a whole, like, it was like a 2-hour tutorial. We had an hour just going around the Ashmolean, looking at all these artifacts that we had studied, and then we had like an hour where we sat and did like a normal tutorial outside, and it was so nice. It was probably one of my like highlights of the year, to be honest. A lot of fun.
Yeah, I agree. It was really fun. And then also I just went to the Ashmolean at different points throughout the year as well when it was open, because you can just go in for free. So that's really good.
Amazing. Yeah, go on.
The Ashmolean, the Ashmolean is very important for that. I mean, from my experience at least, because I teach directly from objects in the Ashmolean, also each single tutorial. But it's important to notice that, for example, the Ashmolean, since it's a university museum and it's directly linked to the university and it works with the university. For example, when the whole world was closed because of the pandemic, but the university was still working, the Ashmolean was still accessible for students. So although it was closed to the public, we could still take students to teach them in the Ashmolean. So it's always there. It's always there for us in whatever circumstances. And also there are special access. Some special access is provided for students. For example, my department, which is the cast gallery, where all the copies of Greek and Roman sculptures are kept, which is very important when studying Roman archaeology, Greek archaeology, Greek sculpture and text and context, whatever else. It's always the lower ground floor, which is close to the public, is always open to students just by showing their university card, and they can go simply and revise in normal circumstances. So it's really part of the teaching, as much, for example, for Greek vases, all the vases, the Attic vases on which my colleagues teach Attic Greek pottery are kept in classics, but they are Ashmolean vases. So there's this constant fluid relation between the two, and the materials are absolutely of the Ashmolean are absolutely essential for our teaching.
Thank you. Got some really great questions coming through now. Keep them coming. The next one: which classical languages are offered, and do we need to know some beforehand?
You don't need to know any classical languages beforehand. I think you can do Latin and Greek as modules, but you really don't need to have any experience in classical languages beforehand. Everything is taught in translation as well. So like you do introductory Latin, you do introductory Greek. If you haven't done either one of those, you'll do like a short module. Greek is in the first term, Latin is in the second. But you don't need to know anything about it. Don't worry about that.
So moving on, what is the divide between the archaeology and history aspects of the course?
Is there a divide? I don't know. Maybe the students have more insight on this.
I think maybe that's going back to like the name of the degree is classical archaeology and ancient history. So you know what's the origins of that name, or is there a divide? Perhaps is a better question. Yeah, indeed.
Well, I feel the divide's very even because we did 2 modules, 1 Greek, 1 Roman, which were like integrated. So we had a class with a classical archaeologist and an ancient historian teaching us. So we would bring in elements of both. And then if you're not doing a language, you do 1 ancient history module and then 1 classical archaeology module in year 1. So it's a very even split, but it's often just brought together.
Yeah, I think the thing about the degree is that it's very, very interdisciplinary. Sorry, stumbled over my word there. But like, I don't know how much of a divide there is in practice. I mean, so for my finals modules, I am taking what is a very traditional archaeology module. I'm taking a scientific archaeology module because I miss science. I really enjoyed it. So I'm really excited to do that. But I think a lot of the time when you're doing archaeology and you're doing history, the two work together. And I think that's the point of the integrated papers, that you view everything, connected. And so in first year, you've got a special paper in ancient history, a special paper in archaeology. I think you pick your finals modules, so you pick 6 finals modules, you pick them out of a list, and then you can it's generally quite evenly split, but even then, like, I think things probably mix together a bit more. But you can kind of weigh it either way to say what you're interested in. So I think for my last module, I'm doing one that is more archaeological than traditionally ancient historical, because that's where my interest is.
So go, Milena.
That is what actually we thought it was when it was created, the strength of this course. The strength of this course is the knitted classes. So the point that the fact that throughout the degree, students are given a possibility of having knitted classes taught by an archaeologist and a historian, which are conceived from the very beginning as something which goes together and which cannot be divided. So and those are the core classes, as you said correctly. I mean, the core classes are what gives you the basis, and the basis that we want to give you is really something that puts together archaeology and history, and then it's up to you. If you want to, as you said, way more towards archaeology or towards history, because there's a certain freedom in the choice of the options. But the core, so what we really want you to learn, which is something compulsory in a way, because the classes are compulsory, is always based on this joint teaching of archaeology and history. So that's actually the point of the degree.
Thank you. And I'm going to skip ahead to a question which relates to something you just mentioned, Sav. Is there an opportunity to focus on the scientific aspects of archaeology?
So there is a module called Science-Based Methods in Archaeology, which is what I'm going to be doing next term. Actually, I've just started my pre-reading on that, which is quite exciting. So that is like quite technical and very scientific. You read like at the moment, my reading's all based around stable isotopes and spectrometry and that sort of thing. I think you can do so. 2 modules I'm doing seem relatively technical. I haven't done them yet, so I can't say for sure. But the science-based methods one is sort of very scientific, and then I'm also doing maritime archaeology, which has a lot of technology and is relatively technical. So there are options for that. It's never going to be like your entire degree, but there are options to like integrate that into the more sort of traditional like art history aspects of classical archaeology and all of ancient history.
Okay, so going back to the top, what is a day in the life like for students doing classical archaeology? So yeah, what time do you have to get up, and well, how many lectures a day, that sort of thing?
Well, I feel it really varies. Like, I don't have sort of a day that I follow every single day, but I normally get up about 7, to be fair, but I think I'm quite unusual. I think a lot of people sleep in. And then I'd do my reading for an essay or start writing my essay, maybe do a lecture. But obviously ours have all been online this past year, so I haven't actually had to go anywhere for these things. And then some days you'll have a tutorial, other days you'll have a class, and then I'd normally sometimes I go to a library, other times I just work in my room just to mix it up a bit. And then I'd normally see my friends sort of late afternoon, early evening. We'd go for a walk or something, go get a hot chocolate or something like that. And then I'd normally eat my dinner in hall and then do a bit more reading and then stop for the day.
Yeah, I keep a much less tight structure than Emily does. I am not great at that, but I will say that your week shifts depending on when you have deadlines. So I remember in second term I had deadlines on Sundays and Mondays because I had a Monday tutorial and a Tuesday class. So usually what happens is you'll have reading for an essay, and the essay will be due in the day before your tutorial or class, whatever the formal teaching is. So what that meant for me was that I would then have sort of Wednesday and Thursday as my weekend almost, instead of, Saturday and Sunday. So I think your schedule will change a lot depending on when your teaching is, and that like your days off. And I do recommend putting in like formal days off, because it is very easy to just like read and keep reading, because there's always more reading to be done, and that is always very intentional. Your reading lists are way longer than you can ever read in a week, but it's always really interesting. And so your days off will shift. I keep a slightly more erratic schedule than Emily does, but that's more about me really than a part of the degree. Like, you can really because there's a lot of independent study, it's mostly independent study, your schedule is very dependent on the way you are, sort of like any formal structure. But I'm sure that's going to probably change a little bit when we have more stuff in person as well, because when lectures are all uploaded online, you choose when to watch them, but if you've got a date and time you've got to get somewhere, it's going to be quite different.
It's really nice to hear how it works for different personalities and learning styles as well. I am going to combine 2 questions this time. So this is about longer term aspirations and what you might do with your degree. So one person asks, what are the graduate options for CAR students? Are there doctorates available? And someone else asks, what kind of careers do CAR graduates do? Is there a mix of classics and non-classics based jobs? And is the degree well regarded? So there's a lot of questions there, but it's about, what do you hope to do with the degree afterwards?
Well, I must say, from my point of view, again, for what I've seen, CAR students go about to do all sorts of jobs, of course. But interestingly, there's one special development that we have noticed, that a lot of, a relatively large number of CAR students continue doing archaeology at a graduate level. We have many of them, and many of them go on in a career on archaeology, and there are lots of colleagues now that were CAR students before. I mean, I can name them. I'm sure that you've been taught by them, but it's incredible how this doesn't happen with classics, because classics students tend to go to other types of career. But it seems like classical archaeology and ancient history students are really driven towards the ancient world, and they want to continue even after their undergraduate degree. So yes, we had a very good rate of success of students who became graduate students, got eventually a doctorate, then doctoral grants, and now they are teaching in Oxford or in other universities in the UK and abroad. So it's quite an interesting development. It looks like our students are really sort of inspired by the study of archaeology.
Well, this makes a lot of sense to me, to be honest, because I don't know what I'm going to do in the future. I'm 19. But after a year of doing CAR, I know for sure that I really want to do a master's in it, because I just want to keep going. Now, like 3 years seems like, before you start a degree, 3 years can seem like ages. But like I finished my first year. I was like, I want to have at least another 3 years of this. And then I'm sure that, I can see how that would continue on for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree. I want to do more studying as well afterwards. And I decided, like you, pretty quickly. I was just enjoying it so much. And then sort of long term, I think I'd quite like to work in museums, but I'm not too sure exactly what yet.
Thank you. I've got 2 questions on EPQs. So we're talking about extended project qualifications, a type of thing people do independently. And the question is an EPQ on a related topic required or beneficial? And then again, just are they necessary?
My school didn't offer them, so I couldn't have done one even if I wanted to as well, and still ended up here. So.
Yeah, and you're there.
I didn't do one either.
Anything to add, Milena, about people who know? So,
not that I know, yeah.
I think it could be something nice to add on your personal statement. If you've done one, it's definitely of interest, but it's totally not necessary. Does the college you pick affect who teaches you from the faculty?
Sorry, can you repeat that? I didn't get
Yeah. So basically, will you have different teachers depending on which college you go to? The actual wording is, does the college you pick affect who teaches you from the faculty? So it's a bit of a question about how much of the teaching is in college, how much is in faculty. We could perhaps answer that as well.
Well, probably partially, but there could be some. Of course, there is some obvious. Speaking of classical archaeology and ancient history, most of the organizing tutors in colleges are historian. So this means that most of the history is done in-house, or anyway, it's planned in a certain way for exchanges with another college if there's a Greek and a Roman historian and so on, and it's mostly always the same people. For archaeology is very different, because there are only 2 colleges which have organizing tutors who are archaeologists. So it's much more centralized in a way. It's more based on who teaches what. So there's the convener of a certain option who is normally asked to provide teaching, either himself, herself, or through a person she recommends. For archaeology, it's except for maybe one or two colleges where the archaeologists tend to do all the teaching. For archaeologists, it's more even in the sense, if there's an option that is like Greek vases, it will be always Thomas Banach, or it will be always the expert, which is like the international experts in the fields, in a way that you get to as a teacher for that option. And it doesn't have anything to do with college, because it's just the people who are the most able to teach a certain subject.
Emily and I both went to Keble, and neither one of us are at Keble. And you're at Johns, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Emily at Johns, I'm at Wadham. We both went to Keble to our Homeric archaeology module because Lisa Bendel, who is like the expert on Bronze Age archaeology, was teaching it, and so we got to go do that. I mean, I think as far as I know, like also instead of just doing things in college or like going to colleges, with your integrated papers, you're usually taught by tutors from like 2 or 3 different colleges, and you're taught with loads of people from different colleges as well. So like there were 7 of us, I think, and our class size was about 7, and I think all of our tutors were from like 3 different colleges. So it's very like for CAR much more than for like classics or any other subject that I know of. It is super integrated. So
yeah, I should point that out. Good that you reminded me. It's that's another of the strong points of CAR, together with the knitted classes. The fact that since the students, the CAR students are a few for each college. It's not a cohort of 10, 9 like in classics. So the point was exactly that of not making them feel like part necessarily of a college group as much as part of a subject, of a course. So that was what the knitted classes were aimed at, also creating these groups which are inter-colleges. They're mixed, and they allow, I think you all know each other in a way differently from other degrees.
I mean, I really appreciate it because I am the only person in my college in my year doing CAR. So if we didn't have like subjects like that, I would be very isolated. So it's and I know I'm not the only one that's the case for. So it's like loads of us. It's like 1 or 2 people per college. So it's really like you get to know so many people from so many colleges, and that's been so good this year as well, when we haven't been able to like integrate and mix as much and meet loads of new people from the pandemic. So.
Yeah, there's 3 of us from St John's, but that's one of the bigger numbers. I feel some people are like the only one in their entire college, I think, because they only take a student every now and again.
So feeding off what you're saying, I think this question is, generally speaking, how many students are in each college? So I think, are we sort of saying like 1 or 2 or 3 out of how many?
Wadham, it's
different. It's different for different colleges.
Wadham's like I think Wadham's the 2nd biggest college in terms of student number. So there's like 100 and something of us in a year, and I am the only person in our year. There was one person doing it 2 years above me, and there's someone doing it who's just about to start as well. But like, it's few and far between in our college, really.
So to summarise, as long as you've made sure that the college you want does do CAR, it in a way it doesn't matter. Okay, what sort of archaeology modules are there?
Do I answer?
Go for it. Yeah.
It's okay. Classical archaeology. The basic. That's the point. We tend to do classical archaeology. Classical archaeology is archaeology of the Greek and Roman world. Of course, students have the possibility of choosing extra sort of classical options, 1 or 2, I think, like Egyptian archaeology or sciences and so on. But mostly it's classical. This means is for the first year is just I think Greek sculpture and Roman architecture, and for the following years we're looking at Greek art and archaeology, Roman art and archaeology. So the big things, the classical Greek archaeology, so Athens, the Parthenon, and so on. Roman archaeology, Roman imperial, so Column of Trajan, Colosseum, and so on. But also some other options like cities and settlements in the Roman Empire and Hellenistic and so forth. But what is important is that the core classes are focused in the first part of the degree on the sort of again the sort of heyday of the classical world, so the aristocracy and democracy and the Roman core. But the later classes focus on more sort of less studied periods in a way, and more focused archaeological clusters. So on the Hellenistic and on the sort of 2nd century AD. So yes, by and large we can say classical, Greek and Roman, but apart from the survey courses, like again Greek and Roman archaeology, there are some more specific aspects that we tend to pick up for the core classes, and students then often develop on those. Especially when thinking of their museum reports, when thinking of some more individual work they would like to do, and so on.
I also think that, like, with a degree like this, it can kind of be very nice to have, like, it sounds quite strange to say, but like you've got, by narrowing the scope of like the periods you're studying or like the cultures you're studying, you can cover so many different like topics and almost so many different disciplines. Like we've done, I remember in our core classes, we talked about things like, we ended up going into like sociology, we ended up talking a bit about like anthropology, we talked about like law and all sorts of like different things like that. Like you cover a lot of disparate topics. Because you have like narrowed your focus, and I think these are all listed on the website, but the topics you cover in your core classes are, it's not just, oh, these are the important events. It's not just like, this is great man history focusing on the like very rich, very elite classes. Like you do some of those, but you always acknowledge that, oh, we're seeing a small part of society. But we covered slaves, we covered coinage, you do a lot of topics that are quite different, that give you a taste of loads of different parts of the ancient worlds in your core classes. So I wouldn't be worried when you see a title like, oh, Republic's Empire. I know this, I've done this in Classic or Latin or whatever. I studied like Actium and things like that, because it's not just that. We covered like villas and housing and architecture in 1 week, and we covered the like Roman colonization in a different week and things like that. So you do so much. Like it sounds like it could be limiting, but it just absolutely the opposite is true.
So I think we've just got time for these last 2 questions. We often get asked this: is there a further reading list, and if so, where can I find it? So normally, well, for classics, we normally say that we don't have a sort of specified reading list. It's more like we want you to go out there and discover books and bring your own opinions to the interviews. Would you say that's also true?
Yes, there's definitely not a reading list. Especially, that's the point. We don't want people to sort of candidates to read beforehand and then to sort of report what they've been reading. We want to test their interest. We want to test their sort of their take on the various topics they would be interviewed on. So it's really, the advice will be really, as we said before, and I think we all agree, to follow your interests. So if you're interested in magic, or if you're interested in Pompeii, just read about those. I mean, that's quite enough, because it just gives you the frame of mind which is necessary to be interviewed successfully.
Exactly. Thank you. Is there a year abroad as part of this degree? Is another question that's come through.
No, unfortunately, this is something that at Oxford is not done because of the need of completing the full terms. So we have explored different ways of trying to take students abroad and so on to do exchanges, but it's really not possible because of the structure of Oxford, which is very demanding, as you all know. So during the term, there's it's compulsory to be in Oxford and to be always present and do your work. So during the 8 weeks of the 3 terms for each year. So it's not possible to go abroad. But before pandemic and so on, students could spend even the whole summer, for example, abroad, both at the end of the first year and at the end of the second year, because at the end of the first year they can choose to go to excavations abroad. I myself have taken loads of students throughout the years in Italy, in Albania, in Greece and so on. And later, for the museum report, they can choose to study a site or some material museums that are abroad, and then as well they will have the possibility of going and study the stuff wherever it's necessary.
If I can squeeze this last question in that's just sneaked in, because it's a lovely one to finish on. What was the most interesting topic you've engaged in so far on your course? We'll put that one to Emily and Sav, and that will be the last one, I promise.
I think for me, I really enjoyed the Homeric archaeology paper that I did last term. And I really loved that. And I think I especially loved the weeks where we did about like the Trojan War and whether that happened or didn't happen, which was just sort of mind-blowing, to be honest. And I really loved looking at all the old palaces and the economy of the Mycenaeans, and that whole topic was just so interesting for me. I really enjoyed that.
I think that for me, I mean, it's hard to choose. I have loved basically everything I have done on this degree so far. I also really love the Homeric archaeology paper, but I think I enjoyed learning about the ways in which we find out information about things, like the ways in which you can use pieces of evidence to, like in this happens the most prominently in the Homeric archaeology paper, I think is for me, but like the way you could use like a few tablets to figure out an entire economic system, and the ways in which you can use like coins and where you find coins to track exactly what happened at various points. I found, so I think it's more of a skill, but the ways in which we use evidence to find out information about the past, and like the way in which we get because you get told axioms about the ancient world, but the way in which you find out that information in particular has been the best part, of course, for me.
It's been so great to hear from you all. Big thank you to our viewers and for your fantastic questions. And thank you, Emily, Milena and Sav, for your time. We're going to go now and get ready for our Ancient and Modern History live stream, which will be starting at 1 o'clock. And we'll see you all soon. Good luck with your applications.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.